the Latina Leadership Podcast, the podcast made for Latinas by Latinas, with Angelica Cázares, Carolina Arenas, Diana Rubi, Jacqueline Villagomez, and Sonia Ramirez. Get comfortable, amiga, and enjoy the conversations.
So hello, welcome to the Latina Leadership Podcast. I am here with Heidy de la Cruz. Heidy, hello, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. So let's kind of kick it off by just having you introduce yourself. Who is Heidy de la Cruz? And tell us more about you.
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Heidy de la Cruz. I am a podcaster. I am a writer, mom of two, wife, a believer, and I am also a medical coding analyst.
Awesome. And I'm really excited to have you here today because I think you have a very unique kind of perspective, and you've created something that I think is very unique and for me is very special, which your podcast on immigration and immigrant stories. Yeah. And so I kind of want to first, before we go too deep into that, I want to start off on how did you start your entrepreneur journey, and why did you want to go in the entrepreneur route?
Yeah, so I've been writing pretty much my whole life, and it wasn't until 2018, 2019 that I was like, oh, there's freelancers out there, you can make, money from the writing. So when I first started my blog, it was just going to be an online journal just to share my experiences, to share memories, to look back and see the things that I've been through and life lessons and things like that. And the more that I was blogging, the more I realized oh my gosh, you can make money off of this. So then I really started to look into freelance, to write for clients, write articles and things like that. And then that same year, 2019, I went to a women's conference, and the host was a podcaster. And so I had followed her on her podcasting journey and was just listening to her episodes and everything. And I loved how she just had friends come on and just share what they were doing in their life, work, what God was doing in their life. And I was like, man, I want to do that. I want to, start a podcast and just talk to people, get opinions and share the great things that they're doing in their life. But I didn't start it in 2019. It wasn't until 2020 that I was like, okay, sorry, no, not 2020, 2022. So from 2019 to 2022, I had put off starting the podcast, but I continued writing, writing for clients and things like that. But then I added podcasting in 2022, and it was in the beginning. And in addition to writing for clients and my blog, I also write on medium.com. And I was reading an article about a immigrant from Kenya. She was writing about how each cultural shock that she experienced here in the United States after she moved really diminished her confidence in herself and, her culture and things like that. And as I was reading that, I was like, man, people don't talk about when migrants come and what happens after they get here. Who helps them? What do they go through? How do they navigate this country? How do they learn English and things like that? So after reading that article, I remember going to my husband and asking him if he remembered when he first arrived to the United States, because he came when he was 9. And he said that he very vividly remembered how he was feeling, what happened, and things like that. So as I'm listening to his story, I'm just like, oh my goodness, that would have been a perfect podcast episode right there. So I went from wanting to just talk to friends about what they were doing in their life to sharing immigration stories. And it's also a topic really close to my heart because my whole family are all immigrants. I was born here, but my parents came in the 90s. And then everyone just slowly in different years came, different processes and stuff. So I'm surrounded by immigrants. I remember vividly having to translate for my dad and having to go to doctor's appointments with him, or he's a mechanic, so I would go to car parts stores with him to translate and things like that. So I'm like, we don't talk about that. So that's how the podcast came about. I started, interviewing friends and family. Like I said, I'm just surrounded by immigrants, and I'm just like, why not just start, with the people that I know most? And then slowly but surely, it's just been God just been sending all these people, all these connections and guests, and it has been really amazing. And to just share, listen to the stories, learn about different cultures too, and then just share those stories on the podcast.
I love that. And so it sounds like you started actually just kind of like writing for yourself, and then it kind of developed into more, and it developed into something different, right? Because podcast is it's a different medium than like writing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, then it also goes hand in hand, because with the podcast, you still have to write, the show descriptions and the show notes and things like that. So I'm like, okay, and that's a different way to, process or, use content and stuff. So you can turn podcasts into blog posts and vice versa, your blog posts into podcasts, if it's, the same topic or whatever. But yeah, it's one thing has led to another. That's how it's been.
And I read one of your articles that talked about the American dream, and just everything in there, I was like, oh, we need to get into this. Like,
oh, really?
Yes, because so you like mentioned how the American dream has changed. And I myself am a first-gen immigrant from Mexico City, but I came here when I was really young. So I have a little bit of a different experience because I grew up in the U.S., but I also, like, we were undocumented, and I was undocumented for most of my life. So I have that understanding of like being an undocumented person in the United States. So when I read this like article of yours on the American dream, it was very curious to me, because I think I am part of that like new generation that like the American dream is not like just buying a house for me, or like being in this like high achieving career. Like that it doesn't fit in my head like that. Like that's not what I like. So I don't know. Yeah. Tell me more about that. Like, what is the American dream and how that's been redefined for you, maybe through your podcast or through your entrepreneur journey?
Yeah. So when I first wrote that article, I can't remember what triggered it, but I always get like these random thoughts, and I love listening to other people's opinions and ideas and things like that. So if you follow me on Instagram, like I'm constantly asking questions like, what do you think about this? Or what is your opinion about that? Because I'm just so intrigued with like, other people's viewpoints and things like that. So I can't remember right now what triggered it, but I was just thinking like, man, like the American dream is not, like you said, like the whole buying a house, white picket fence, 2 kids, married, like it was back in the day. Like when people think of the American dream, like that's what they would think of. But what I'm seeing lately is just been freedom. Freedom as in like financial freedom for time, to have control of your time. So it's definitely changed. And also I've realized that a lot of people now have a 9-to-5, and they have like a side hustle or a side project or things like that. Or they're having that side hustle or project until they can fully leave the 9-to-5. Because it was go to school, go to college, get a good job, a career, and then just stay there until you retire, right? But it's just changed so much in the last few years. I love asking my guests what the American dream means to them, because before they get here, there's usually an expectation that they have with the United States. And where do they get that expectation from? Is usually from books, movies, music videos, media. And so a lot of them do have, different do expectations. And then once they get here, it's a different reality. And, not saying that they can't achieve their American dream, but it's just a lot harder, right, than what they realize it actually is going to be once they get here. So I love hearing the different the different dreams that people have. A lot of them, just like the freedom that we have here to just be yourself, to do what you want to do, change careers when you want to change careers. All the opportunities that the United States presents. Obviously, we know that this is not a perfect country. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There is a lot of things that are, not equal for people and things like that. But compared to, the countries that they come from, it's a lot more, there's a lot more accessibility, and there's a lot more opportunities here than what other countries present. So my American dream, oh my gosh, I don't think I've ever thought about this, but my American dream would have to be financial freedom as well. Like I want to be able to have control of my time, be able to like, if I want to go somewhere, be able to be like, okay, I'm going, taking my family and we're going and things like that. How I haven't achieved my American dream yet, but on the way.
Yeah.
And obviously it's like, I think it's also a journey. It's a work in progress. So, and it could probably change 5 years from now. My American dream could probably change. Like, so.
I really like that you said that, because I think that is part of like redefining. And I think as Latinas, which I feel like our voices are barely becoming more highlighted, or like we're finding more ways, like more platforms for our voices to be heard. So I think that like that idea that it can change, like we need to hold on to that, because it can. Yeah.
It can. Yeah.
Cool. And so I am curious to learn more about like your podcast. Do you ever hear about immigrants striving to become entrepreneurs on there? Have you noticed like a common trait for folks like that? Yeah, tell me.
Yes, a little. I think all my guests, I want to say, I want to say like 100% of my guests, they all have their own business. And yeah, I'm trying to think. I think they all do, because I realized that like, they all have their own business. They were able to start their own business. And then, so I give them the opportunity at the end of the episodes to promote their business. And we talk about like how they got into it and things like that. And one of my guests, her episode is not published yet, but she did mention that, she ended up starting her own business because she had to redefine what the American dream was to her. So she made her own dream and started her own business. But yes, a lot of 100% of my guests have their own business, which goes against that narrative that immigrants are coming to take jobs. I mean, we know that immigrants do the jobs, hard labor, right? They do labor in the field and the construction and everything. But a lot of them do end up starting their own businesses. And I think there was an article, and I can't remember where it was at, but it had showed a statistic of what percentage of like the Fortune 500 companies were actually started by immigrants and children of immigrants. And the percentage was really high. I was like, oh my gosh, look at us. Like we're started all these businesses, and they're huge companies now and things like that. So yes, that is a very common trend with my guests, having their own businesses. And I love that, because I can also provide for my listeners, different avenues and different services and products that people have available.
I love that. And something that I really like to talk about is like the entrepreneurial spirit. Like I feel like there's a spirit about people who are entrepreneurs. And it's interesting because I think that like in like Latin American countries, the entrepreneurship is a big thing, but we don't call it that, right? And so like, for example, growing up, my mom had her own cleaning business, but growing up, I didn't think like, oh, my mom's an entrepreneur. She's working for herself. Like she's finding her clients and doing her own marketing, right? All that jazz. I just was like, my mom's cleaning houses. Like, I don't know. I didn't think about it. And then now I'm like, that was an entrepreneurial journey. Like, regardless of what the business is, I think a lot of people in our community, like they are entrepreneurs, but maybe we don't have the language, right? Or resources even to kind of know like that's what it is that they're doing.
Yeah, that is true. Like growing up, a lot of my dad's friends, they had their own businesses and things like that. But yeah, you're right. Like I never really thought of them as like, entrepreneurs or like business owners. It's just like that was their job, but it was really like their own business.
What?
That is interesting.
Yeah. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about some of the challenges and obstacles that you faced as a Latina entrepreneur?
I think it just has to do with like my internal conflict and battles, because I tend to doubt myself a lot, and I tend to like question myself a lot too, like why am I doing this kind of thing, and then just like get frustrated with myself. Probably that imposter syndrome, like who am I to be doing this, to be sharing immigrant stories and things like that. But then like when I do have those moments of doubts, my husband is very good at getting me out of that. But then also like I feel like God always sends me like a message right when I need it. For example, last week I had went to a women's conference, It was on a Sunday. And, you know, when you go to these women conferences, like you end up leaving so full and so motivated and so inspired. But then at the same time, it's also very emotionally draining. So you're like very tired at the end of the day when you leave those events. So I was like on my way home and I was like exhausted, but I was also thinking of like the things that I still needed to do once I got home. Because, you know, like when you're an entrepreneur, like your work is all the time. So I was thinking of my to-do list, and then I was just thinking to myself, like, why am I doing this to myself? Like, I don't have to do any of this. And then it was just like that split second thought. And then the very next day, I had a guest, and again, her episode is not published yet, but she was telling me that she was praying for a space to share her story. She's also she was also undocumented, and then she was documented, and then now she's in the process of becoming a citizen. And so she was telling me that she was praying about a place to share her story, and then she came across my Instagram, and then she saw that in one of my stories I was talking about, like, you know, how God has me in certain places to do certain things, and talking about my podcast. And then so she sent me a message, and she was like, I honestly didn't even think you were going to respond, but you did. And so then she so I responded, and then obviously she was able to be on the podcast. So it was just like that little moment of her telling me that she like prayed, and then, you know, she came across my page. Like that just fulfills like and takes away the doubt that I was having the day before. And I feel like that always happens. Like whenever I have those moment of doubts, like I always get like a message or someone telling me like, oh, hey, like good job, or this article resonated with me, or, you know, this episode was really good. So those moments fill me up and keep me going. Because again, like, I don't know, you just have those moments where you're just like doubting yourself because it's hard. Like entrepreneurship is hard. And I had heard or read that it's like 99.9% of it is just like that internal battle within yourself. And that's literally like what I go through all the time.
And so when you are in, you know, like, do you give yourself a little pep talk? Like, I know you said, you know, there are things that come to you, but what are some things maybe you do for yourself to keep yourself motivated as an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So whenever I get like a comment or a message from somebody, I screenshot that, and I kind of like go back to them when I'm having those moments of doubts, just to like look through, and it's like, you know, like my writing is inspiring people, or the episodes are, you know, helping people or inspiring other people and things like that. So I try to do that. And then I also try to remember my why, you know, like what is the reason why you started. So I try to, you know, go back and remember my why and be like, okay, like this is why I'm doing it. It's something bigger than me. Like, yeah, I have days that I'm just like, it's a lot of work, but then there's other days it's like, okay, no, this is why I'm doing it, and this is why I keep going. Like, and regardless of how I'm feeling, like when I do think of like, why am I doing everything, or why, you know, when I'm questioning myself, I never stop. Like, again, I've been writing for my whole life. I started the podcast in 2022 and I'm still going. And so like, I don't picture myself not doing it. Like, I remember one day I was thinking, I was like, man, like, what would I do if I wasn't doing this? And I was just like, I don't even want to know, because I like what I do. So yeah. So whatever, no matter if I'm having a doubt, like I still keep going. So yeah.
I love that. And I am curious, because I know you mentioned you still working like a 9 to 5. So what is that mindset? Like, what is that mindset shift? How did that happen for you? Or like, do you kind of like continuously work on that? Or is it now just kind of like, I have my 9 to 5 and then I know that I'm working on this like special thing for me? Like, what does that look like?
I feel like the podcast and especially the writing is an outlet for me. Is really how I can like express myself creatively, and then also just like, again, just provide encouragement for other people, and things like that. So I really feel like if I didn't have the writing or the podcasting, like I would need to find another outlet besides to like kind of decompress from after work. Because, you know, my job can be mentally draining. So it's just like sometimes there are days where I'm like, after work, I'm like, okay, I don't want to do anything, like no writing, no podcasting or anything like that. But it's just, yeah, it's just a creative outlet for me. And Also, with the podcasting, I realized that I am a good interviewer, which people have told, which I didn't even realize that until, obviously I started the podcast, and I've been told by my guests, like, man, like you really like ask good questions and really dig deep and everything. So it's just like really cool to find these skills within me that I didn't even know I had by trying something new. But yeah, some days after work, I don't feel like doing anything. And then some days I'm just like all motivated, like, yes, let's do it. Let's, crush this episode out or write this article and get it out there. And again, the feedback is very helpful to keep the motivation going.
I really like that. What do you feel like is the most fulfilling part of your creative business?
Most fulfilling part, yeah, I would have to say the feedback again, just because my goal with whatever article I'm writing, blog post, newsletter, or episode, my goal is always to just connect with one person. And I'll sometimes get like it's probably not even, they don't even comment on the things. They'll like send me a message directly. So either I'll get a text message or I'll get a DM or anything like that, and they'll tell me like, thank you for this post. It like I really needed this encouragement, or I really connected with this. And lately my friends and my listeners have been recommending my podcast. So I'm just like, oh my gosh, really? So I'm like in this Facebook group, and one of the days was like, share anything that was encouraging, whether it's a blog post, an podcast. And one of the ladies had recommended my podcast. And I was like, oh my, and she had not even tagged me. So I just like was scrolling, and then I saw it. I was like, oh my gosh, like my podcast is being suggested to other people. So it was just like those little moments like that is like brings me like so much joy. And it's just like, okay, like, it's working. I mean, it's doing something, it's getting recognition. So
that's awesome. And I'm sure, I've worked with entrepreneurs in the past. And so I know that there are a lot of times when like there is that kind of like doubt, and it can a lot of times feel like really like lonely, to be honest, right? To be an entrepreneur. And I don't know, what would you say to like an entrepreneur who right now is just kind of like, you know what, like I'm ready to put the towel in, like I'm ready to like move on and forget about this. What would you say to them?
Find community, to be completely honest. I'm involved. I'm in so many Facebook groups, like for podcasting, for writing, just women's group. And it's so definitely find community wherever you can, whether it is on a Facebook group or it is, on an Instagram page or anything like that, because it can get lonely, and only another entrepreneur will understand. So if like your family, if you don't come from a family of entrepreneurs, or your friends are not entrepreneurs, they won't understand. So definitely find community. Also, if you're feeling unmotivated, try to like maybe learn a new skill or something, kind of like to take your mind off your work, but then like kind of focus on something else, because sometimes we can get burned out doing the same thing over and over and over again. So I definitely would give that advice.
I love that. And so I know you've, had your podcast for a little bit, a while now. Can you give us like a highlight episode, or maybe like one of your most kind of inspiring stories that you'd like to share with us? And maybe like a lesson or something.
I mean, they're all good.
I know. I think especially like immigrant stories, like there's just so much.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Well, I've interviewed 3 DACA recipients, but only 2 of them have been published. And each one of those episodes, I've cried. And I'm not a crier. I'm not a crier. I don't tend to like get emotional or things like that. But those 3 episodes, like each of them after I recorded, like I cried. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So you mentioned you're a DACA recipient. So if you come on my podcast, I will probably cry on your episode too. But no, it's honestly just like the resilience and the inspiration as to like, they had this obstacle, but yet they didn't give up on their dream. So like if it was to go to school, they didn't give up on it, although it took them longer. than what it would somebody who does have their documents, but they still, continued starting their own businesses, right? They found a way to be able to do that. So it's just like there's a lot of things that are against them, but they don't let that stop them. So those episodes have been really, really inspirational.
I love that. And let me, so I'm formerly undocumented, and it's interesting because I grew up during the time when undocumented and unafraid, before that movement started, before DACA. So when I was applying for colleges, I actually didn't know if I was going to be able to go, because at that time we still didn't have documentation. But thankfully, we were able to find a way to a path to citizenship. So, but anytime I hear a documented person's story, it's the same. I feel like I have the same response, just because a lot of times, those are folks that grew up here, so they do feel very connected to the country, and they've built their life here, right? So I feel that. I love that. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the Latina Leadership Podcast audience?
Just keep going. Remember your why whenever you're feeling, unmotivated or questioning yourself or having that imposter syndrome. Just know that everything inside you have everything inside you that you need to succeed. You are enough and you belong. That's the biggest thing right there, is that you belong wherever it is that you are. You belong, and just keep going. You're here for a reason. Your voice is needed, and I'm so glad that you're here. So just keep going.
Thank you so much, Heidy. And where can folks find you?
So I hang out on Instagram. My handle is my name, HEIDY, DELACRUZ, 13. So that's Instagram. And then I just recently launched revamped my website. So so it's HeidyDeLaCruz.com. Super simple. But there's all the information about me, my services, podcast, and things like that at my website.
Thank you. And one of the questions that we always ask our guests before we close out is, do you consider yourself a leader?
Oh, I guess so.
Tell us why. Yeah.
Yes, I actually, one of my friends had told me. She was like, I can see you as the person who takes charge and does what they say they're going to do. So, and I do get messages also that people that I inspire people to do certain things. So I feel like that's a leader who inspires others to do things.
I love that so much, and I just really enjoyed talking with you today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
and
thank you so much for having me.
Yes, thank you.
What did you think of the conversation? If you enjoyed what you heard, let us know in the comments. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thank you for listening to the Latina Leadership Podcast, and we will see you next time.